I love detours. When I'm traveling, quite often I will make a detour along a road I didn't expect to go, or off the beaten path, or just off the road, or just to stop. And quite often I find things that are far more interesting in the place I was heading towards. While there's a plan for this set of postings, occasionally, well, maybe more than occasionally, I'd like to take a detour, and today's one of those. To anyone who's interested in the life of prayer, I would commend poetry to them. Now, poetry is difficult for us people of our age and our society because we're just not taught to read it. It means reading in a different way. But in reading poetry, we will develop skills that will help us be aware of what our practice is accomplishing in us. It will force us to see the world differently, to see our experiences differently, to think differently. And it will be difficult for us because most of us in our Western training have not been taught that. We are taught to read in a specific way, and poetry challenges that. I often think of poetry for someone who wants to be in prayer as like dance for a football player. Dance is often used as part of football players' training. Now, very rarely do they do pirouettes or rumbas on the football pitch, but the skills they build up in dance prove useful. Today I'd like to share a poem by a woman named Joanne Kyger. If you don't know her, I really do recommend her to you. Joanne, who died in 2017, was not only a poet and a teacher and an encourager of other poets, but she was also a Buddhist and practitioner of meditation and contemplation most of her life. And that experience very much colors her poetic work. At one point, she was married to another poet named Gary Schneider, another poet you should read if you haven't before, who was also a prayer, a meditator, and his reflections were much more on how prayer and meditation interrelates with nature. In fact, Joanne accompanied Gary to Japan in the early 60s when he went there to study Zen. She went as a model and an actress, but began to study Zen herself, and in many ways progressed at a quicker pace than Gary did, and that led to the tensions that eventually broke down the marriage. In her own poetry, she is wonderful because she is able to discuss great spiritual truths and insights from her years of practice, but also is grounded very much in the here and now. In the later part of her life, she lived in a very beautiful part of the coast of California, and her poetry often reflects how the spiritual insights she has play out in nature and the world around her. She was also capable of being brutally honest about her own shortcomings and the difficulty she has in living out her practice. In the poem I want to share today, she talks about awareness, which I think is something close to living a life in prayer, and how not only does it bring peace and love and openness to beauty, but also brings compassion. And compassion is maybe the difficult part of a life in prayer, because compassion leaves us open to very difficult situations. It leaves us open to pain and the suffering of the world. So perhaps that is a health warning for those who are starting out on this path, that yes, you will find peace, you will find wholeness, you'll find love, you'll find an appreciation of things you have not appreciated before, but you're also opening yourself to pain and suffering and the difficultness of people's lives and the difficultness of the world, because that's part of the compassion, and these two things go together. The poem I'm reading today comes from her last book called On Time. Time was one of her other interests, and interesting it's her last book, and so On Time is a sort of ambiguous title. Yes, the poems have arrived before she dies, but she also is reflecting on the limited time she has left. And it is dated February 2010. "2010 Golden Tiger Year. Now I'm stuck here with awareness. For the yellow jacket flying around, who's bound to expire once I close the door and exit. Sulking along at the edge of rage for the rest of your days. I won't have it. Wild, dangerous, extravagant and bright. Big, bold and unpredictable. Smash, 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 smash. Shatter, crash, crash, crash.